One of the most common questions we get asked about the Jeep Wranglers, what's a good suspension to put underneath? Now, we've always been an advocate for a low center of gravity. Keeping the Jeep low with a large tire is not only going to make it ride and perform better on road, but it's going to give you that stability off-road that you really need. Now in 2016, we outfitted our 2013 Wrangler Rubicon with a JKS Manufacturing 2.5-inch suspension kit. Now one of the things that we opted for with this suspension kit were the Fox 2.0 Adventure Series shocks. Now one of the big reasons we like these shocks is Fox makes these a IFP shock. Now what that means is it has an internal floating piston. Now why is that important? Well, in a typical, let's say low-end shock, if you will, many are emulsion. Now emulsion shock means it's a nitrogen charged shock, but instead of having the nitrogen separated from the oil is mixed in. Now unfortunately what that equates to, especially on something when it's modified, is you rapidly will deteriorate the actual fluid itself and you'll lose valving properties. The reason is as it starts to move, it's aerating all of the fluid and you're gonna have just a basic breakdown in performance, especially if you spend a lot of time off-road. Now these Fox 2.0 Adventure shocks are a bit different. One of the main reasons is you do have this IFP, internal floating piston. Now this sits at the very top of the shock and the oil sits below it. Now this means you're not going to have cavitation like you would with an emulsion shock. These are an excellent entry-level performance series shock and we've had very good luck with them over the course of the past few years. Now here's the thing. As our Jeep has grown over the years, so has sort of our suspension needs and the demand that's on the vehicle. Not only have we changed the sprung weight by adding ARB front bumper and a Warren winch and these aftermarket steel flares, but we've added unsprung weight by putting in a Dynatrac Pro Rock 44 front axle and of course our heavy duty and awesome 37-inch tall Nitto Ridge Grapplers mounted on 17-inch KMC beadlock wheels. Now we've had great luck with our suspension in general over the past few years. However, over the past 6 months, we've definitely noticed that we've been blowing through our up travel quite a bit more than we used to. Part of this is we're probably driving a little bit harder. The other part is all of this added weight that we've continued to put on the vehicle is starting to catch up to us. So what's a good solution? Well, first off, given these are rebuildable shocks, we could have easily sent these to Fox, added a little bit more valving, and then tested it out and seeing where we are from there. However, we knew given the type of terrain that we do and the future upgrades that we'd like to do to the Jeep, we're probably still going to find the limits of these sooner rather than later. So we decided to do a full shock upgrade. And not only did we just go and pick some sort of catalog shock, but we wanted something that we could dial in specifically for this Jeep. So that's what we're going to talk about today is our new Fox 2.5 Remote Reservoir shocks. Sure, a general remote reservoir shock is a great thing to have, and a 2.5-inch one means we now have more fluid, and now we have a full reservoir that's designed to hold the internal floating piston that's going to sit right here, and now we got a charge that we can adjust. So if we want to go from 180 psi to 200 psi, we can increase valving without a lot of work. And matter of fact, we don't even have to take the shock apart. However, we decided to take things one step further and get the DSC series shocks. Now these are dual speed compression shocks. What that is Fox gives you a high speed and a low speed compression reservoir. Now, when we say speed, we're not necessarily referring to the speed of the vehicle, but the velocity at which the shock moves. So for your high speed, that's going to be your fast washboard roads and any type of desert condition where you're going to have rapid movement out of the axle or suspension, of course. Now, low speed, that's going to be your big slow motions, but might, if you're rock crawling, you got the tire drooping out or the body moving over very quickly, these are going to control this. It's a high flow but low speed action for the shock. Now we'll post up a little diagram here so you can get a better idea of what you're looking at for the flow divider that is at the end of this. Now this shock, just like this Fox 2.0, still has a regular fluid type piston here, and that's going to have a standard valve pack on the top and the bottom for rebound and compression. And yes, we can adjust that too if we find that we need more one way or the other. But by adding this DSC adjuster here, we can easily do adjustments on the fly. Let's say if we're out, wheeling in Moab and we just got off a hard rock crawling trail and we've got it set up for that. Now we want to go bomb through the desert. We can hop out of the vehicle and literally with just a few clicks, we can dial this thing in to better fit those terrain needs. Now Fox designed this system to be a complete bolt-on upgrade. This means they fit right into your factory towers, both front and rear. Now each shock is corner specific, and it's important to note because of the front shocks. Not only is this reservoir going to stick out and point to a certain direction, but you'll need to use these provided mounts to make sure that you get the resi set in place. Now you will need to drill your frame to put these on, but Fox does have this handy detent here so you won't mess up where the reservoir needs to go. Another little housekeeping, we do not have factory inner fender flares, so we can't speak to if these will or will not work with factory inner fenders. One of the things that we did years ago is we went with an aftermarket set of flares to allow us to run a 37-inch tall tire with this very modest 2.5-inch lift. While the DSCs are definitely more off-road oriented, it's not something that you won't see the benefit of on road. Now, on the highway, we did exactly what Fox recommends. We started with everything set to 0 and sort of worked our way up from there. What we found was that the low speed compression adjusting was definitely more effective for us than the high speed. Now, we just don't need a lot of high speed compression adjustment for where we are. Our roads really aren't that bad, so keeping them at a 2 works perfectly fine. Now, as we add gear to the Jeep, whether that be putting our spare tire in the back, adding our family, or just gearing it out for a long distance trip, we have found that it's effective to tune up the low speed compression just to lessen a little bit of the body roll, and it just sort of makes the Jeep overall feel a little bit tighter on the highway. For everyday driving, we can dial it back, and even with everything set to 0, we have more valving out of these at a starting gate than we did at our 2.0 Foxes. Obviously, adjustability was the name of the game with these shocks, and since we've been able to take this thing off-road, we've definitely worked with getting it dialed in for our needs. Now, just like for our on-road uses, we dialed everything back to 0 initially just to get a baseline of what we needed. Now, what we found for most of our specific needs off-road, we dial the high-speed compression to about a 4, and we will typically run the low speed around a 6. Now, this is really going to depend on if we've dropped air pressure in the tires. Are we really rock crawling? Is it a light trail day? And it's going to be one of those things where if you get these shocks, you're going to want to spend some time and actually get out, get your hands dirty, and adjust the knobs. See what makes sense for your application. If you don't have the unsprung weight that we do, you might not need the low speed compression adjustment. If your Jeep's heavier, you might want more of that low speed to control the body roll a little bit more. given our low center of gravity and, you know, we don't have the most up travel on this Jeep, we really find this low speed compression adjuster really helps just in general on our vehicle. We're very happy with this setup, and we think, you know, given it's a shock that's designed to go from 2.5 to 4 inches of lift, we really have room to grow. Even if we ended up putting like big 1-ton axles underneath this thing one day, we don't have to ditch the shock. We've got something that has adjustable valving. It's got plenty of size and strength for it, so we can really grow. As we look at most of our upgrades as investments and not just whim parts, we definitely say if you're thinking about getting a shock upgrade and you found that what you have maybe isn't enough valving, but you're not sure what to tell the guy over the phone how to valve your, you know, shock, and you want to do it yourself, we highly recommend looking at this. Yes, there are other compression adjuster shocks in the aftermarket, but few have the ability to allow you to dial in both the high and low speed compression, and that's really going to be a big deal in letting you hone in your ride quality, both not on road but off road as well.